Pāua fishers and other stakeholders have travelled a hard road since the Kaikoura earthquake devastated the fishery, resulting in its closure. In December 2021, the fishery reopened for a 3-month season. Now, the commitment to a sustainable fishery and attention to science and data are at the forefront of decisions and advice around the reopening for the commercial fishers and other guardians of this precious marine environment.
The Kaikoura Marine Guardians really started about 15 years ago with an initiative from Ngāti Kuri, from our local runanga, who wanted to put together a management plan for the coast that had consensus agreement across the entire community. We were appointed by the 2 ministers of fisheries and conservation, and we have an advisory role to them. So we have no budget as such to do anything ourselves, but what we can do is use our local knowledge and what science is available to us to make recommendations to the ministers. Immediately following the earthquake, it was obvious that there had been a huge amount of change. The impact on the paua population was huge because paua have a complex life cycle. Like they spawn, they settle out, the young are attracted to a coralline algae, and then they settle on that in the intertidal, and then they disappear into the rocks and the crevices and they hide, but they're basically in that intertidal zone, and for most of the coast that intertidal was lifted out. So we lost about 3 year classes of paua over most of the coast, and for some of the coast there was an 8-metre uplift in places and just everything was dead. In the walk I did up there 2 weeks after the quake, I just walked through acres and acres of dead paua, and it was like 10 paua per square metre just baking in the sun. It was rather smelly. One of the things that made a huge difference for the flatter areas of the coast was that all this material that was lifted out that died, we actually had an unusually calm period, so there just wasn't any serious wave action. So that all this decomposing material took all the oxygen out of the water, and so this anaerobic slug of water just went up and down with the tide and basically sterilised the rocks. And that happened for some quite big extents up and down the coast. So yeah, we had multiple sets of problems happen together. The immediate response from us was, yeah, we've got a major problem here, we have to do something urgently. So we requested of the Minister of Fisheries that there be an embargo on all catch, and that was immediately put in place. That seemed sensible to everyone. And we requested that as much science as possible be done. So we had large numbers of different institutions here. We had Otago and Canterbury University, we had Cawthron Institute, we had Niwa, we had all sorts of private, there was quite a bit of money put out through MPI and Niwa and various grant organisations. So there were many, many different science groups doing really good work here. When it came to reopening, it was often difficult getting people who were not particularly aware of the biology to understand some of the constraints that we're working under. So there were large groups who were more focused on their rights and hadn't really considered the biology as deeply as it needed to be. So there were lots of different sets of advice went to the Minister. Like we as the Guardians had sent advice to the Minister there should be a very low recreational bag limit to try and stop the gold rush mentality that we were almost certain would happen, and it seems very likely that it has in fact happened. My guess is that the recreational allowance that the Minister made of 5 tonne has been exceeded by a factor of about 10 or more. There's lots of surveys that have been done. The one we're particularly interested in at the moment is the recreational fishing survey. So what we need is that data. We need recreational reporting, and then we can work out what is actually reasonable, what is workable, and what's sustainable long term. You notice the bigger size down spyglass, do you? Down there?
Yeah. Well, everywhere I've been able to catch 140 without any problem at all. I've been commercially paua diving here approximately 31 years. I grew up along the bay here a little bit further in South Bay, so I've been diving since I was about 8. Just getting a feed, spearfishing, that sort of thing, and led into working paua diving. Pāua Mac 3, and there are Pāua Macs all around the countries for the different management areas, quota management areas, is an association of quota owners and fishermen. And we decide on size limits and percentage of catch and total catch that's going to come from each area. And I take that information along and share it with the Korowai and through there with Kaikoura Marine Guardians. Economically, it's been very trying times. Some of our members have other jobs, builders or electricians, or some quota owners are involved in other businesses. Some of us, it's all we do, and we've definitely been hard hit. It's a snorkel fishery. I use a 5mm wetsuit in the summer or 7 in the winter, and normal snorkeling gear, so mask, snorkel, fins, weight belt. Depending on whereabouts I'm going for the day as to which of these measuring knives I take with me, and I use it to take the animal off the rock, and then whilst I'm still in the water I measure it, and if it's a keeper it goes into the net which is attached to my chest, so I've got 2 free hands, and if it's too small then it goes back on the rock. And this one here is what would be a just legal size one, so just over 125mm, and the comparison here with this one using the bigger caliper knife, and this one is well in excess of 150mm, and you see there the difference in the volume, and therefore the weight of meat is at least twice. The reason that we have these different size limits in different areas is to allow extra breeding cycles to occur before they are taken. We are very closely monitored by Ministry of Fisheries, and we have to, still call it paperwork, but it's now all electronic reporting, and we have to fill out as we go during the day each hand net of paua that comes on the boat, and at the end of the day that information is sent off to FishServe in Wellington, and it has to be corroborated by the factory where you land your fish to. So it's very strictly controlled.